The car was already burning when the first call came in. Just after 6 p.m. on December 6, 2014, a motorist spotted a small sedan engulfed in flames on a rural road outside Cortland, Mississippi. As firefighters raced toward the scene, a figure emerged from the fire. Jessica Chambers was walking down the road, her clothes melted to her skin, her hair gone, her body burned beyond recognition. She collapsed before help could reach her. Paramedics loaded her into an ambulance, fighting to keep her alive as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Her airway was compromised, her lungs burned from inhaling flames and smoke. Medical staff documented that speaking would have required extreme effort, and every attempt caused visible distress. Despite the pain and the shock, Jessica tried to speak. Investigators later said she whispered a name. Then she whispered it again. Jessica Chambers was 19 years old. She had graduated high school and was living a life centered around family, friends, and a close-knit community. Cortland was the kind of place where people recognized one another's cars and noticed when something felt off. On the night she was attacked, nothing in her routine suggested danger. She had made plans, exchanged messages, and expected to be home later that night. But sometime after dark, someone met her, forced her into her own car, and set it on fire with her still inside. At the hospital in Memphis, doctors worked through the night. Burns covered most of her body, and the damage to her lungs was catastrophic. Investigators waited nearby, hoping she might regain consciousness long enough to answer questions. Jessica died the next day, never able to give a full statement. What she had managed to say became the center of the case. In court, prosecutors argued that her statements qualified as a dying declaration, a recognized exception to hearsay rules. The defense argued that the extent of her injuries made reliable speech impossible. Expert testimony conflicted, leaving jurors to decide how much weight, if any, to give her words. Multiple responders recalled her saying the name Eric or Derek. Others believed she said Eric followed by a last name that sounded like Chambers. The uncertainty mattered. In a case with no witnesses and little physical evidence, her final words carried enormous weight. Police focused on Eric Deaton, a young man Jessica had known for years. Their relationship had been described as casual and on and off, with no public indication of violence. Deaton became a person of interest because of his proximity to Jessica that evening, and because few others were known to have been with her shortly before the attack. Deaton admitted he had been with her earlier that night. He said they had driven around and then parted ways. According to him, Jessica dropped him off, and he never saw her again. Investigators found inconsistencies in his account. They also noted burns on his hands, which he claimed came from working on a car. The crime scene offered few answers. Fire investigators determined that the blaze had been intentionally set using an accelerant poured inside the vehicle. Burn patterns indicated the fire started near the driver's seat. Any fingerprints, DNA, or trace evidence that might have identified the attacker were destroyed by heat. Responders later described the scene as unlike anything they had encountered on a rural Mississippi road. The heat from the burning vehicle warped metal and cracked pavement. Grass along the shoulder ignited in patches, and the smell of fuel hung in the air long after the flames were suppressed. There were no nearby houses, no cameras, and no witnesses who saw the attack itself, only the aftermath. Investigators reconstructed the timeline using phone data and traffic patterns, narrowing the window in which the attack occurred. They determined that Jessica had been alive when the fire was set and had managed to escape the vehicle briefly before collapsing. That detail alone intensified the scrutiny on the case, underscoring the deliberate nature of the act and the limited opportunity for evidence to survive. As the investigation unfolded, pressure mounted to make an arrest. The community was shaken by the brutality of the crime. Vigils were held, and the case reshaped how residents viewed safety in a place long considered quiet and predictable. Prosecutors moved forward with charges against Deaton, building their case around circumstantial evidence and the interpretation of Jessica's final words. The first trial ended without a verdict. Prosecutors presented cell phone records, burn patterns, and witness testimony to suggest Deaton had been with Jessica at the time of the attack. The defense countered that the evidence was circumstantial and that no physical proof placed him at the scene when the fire was set. Jurors could not agree. A second trial followed, ending the same way. Two hung juries left the case unresolved and the evidence unchanged. The repeated mistrials also revealed the limits of the courtroom when certainty cannot be reached. Jurors were asked to weigh medical reality against human instinct, to decide whether a dying person could speak clearly enough to identify an attacker. Appeals and reviews focused on procedure rather than new facts, leaving the core question unanswered. The case did not end with a verdict, but with exhaustion. Years passed, and the case became a fixture in true crime discussions and local memory. Advances in forensic science offered hope, but produced no definitive breakthroughs. New prosecutors reviewed the file with the same constraints their predecessors faced. Without new witnesses or recovered evidence, the legal standard for a conviction remained unmet. The case was formally closed without charges, though authorities stated it could be reopened if new information emerged. For investigators, the file remains open in spirit even if not in practice. Every tip is logged, every rumor evaluated, waiting for something solid enough to reopen the door that closed without resolution. For Jessica's family, time did nothing to dull the loss. They continued to speak publicly, attend hearings, and push for renewed attention. Each anniversary brought reminders of the unanswered questions and the person Jessica would have become had she lived. The murder of Jessica Chambers remains one of the most disturbing, unsolved cases in Mississippi. A young woman died alone on a dark road, fighting to breathe, trying to name the person who had done this to her. Whether her last words were enough, or whether they were misunderstood, remains at the heart of the case. Without clarity, the legal system stalled, leaving a permanent gap between suspicion and proof that has yet to be closed. Cases like Jessica's endure because they force difficult questions about evidence, memory, and accountability. They leave families waiting in the space between law and truth. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.